Hey everyone, welcome to our small footprint. My name is Nyssa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. Today's video is a what we eat in a week. I'm sitting out in my garden to do the voiceover for this because I've got a bunch of stuff to get done before I go on this month's grocery haul. So I am sitting, which is unusual for me, and I have all my notes here, but I also have a bunch of other stuff that I'm going to use for planning video and things like that. So it's Tuesday afternoon and I'm just trying to get as much done as possible before I have to head to the Brisbane for the supply run. So I'm sitting out in my very neglected garden just to get away from the house so that there's less children noise and things like that, though the guinea fowl have joined me, so they might arc up soon anyway. So what we eat in a week. Now everyone loves a what we eat in a week. It's a lot of effort to film a what we eat in a week, not the filming so much because you're just filming meals, but putting it together, the collation of it and the voiceover of it is a fair bit of work. So I don't do them very often, but I do like to do them sort of once every cycle at least, especially after a hamper, so that you can see the way that I'm using some of the stuff that I received from the hamper and how we're eating when stores are low and that sort of thing. So I put one together because there was less food being prepared because we had done most of the food prep, so we're more just eating stuff, and thought that was a good time to do one for you. Now there is some days there's lunch, some days there isn't. But generally speaking, it's 2 meals a day, lunch and dinner. Breakfast is a serve yourself affair in our house. Darryl and I don't really eat breakfast, we just have coffee, and the kids are allowed to have whatever they want. So there is either cereal available, we do Wheat Bix, cornflakes, rice bubbles, things like that with rice milk. There is no cereal left at this point in the month though. Or we'd have yogurt and granola, but normally that is a summer thing. I don't make yogurt a whole lot in winter because they don't eat it a whole lot. So in winter we predominantly do porridge. So I either come out and cook them a pot of porridge and they eat it that first day, then it goes in the fridge and they'll reheat it for the second day. Or lately they've been having the instant porridge that I have been making. I've just been making up big containers full of a few different flavours of instant porridge, and they've been serving themselves from that. So Darryl and my first meal is normally lunch, which is what I share, and then dinner for everyone. We do have snacks and stuff throughout the day at times that I don't generally show because it's just something that's happening. Sonnet likes to make popcorn a lot. We have bits and pieces of leftovers and things like that, so I don't always film any of that either. But this is a what we eat in a week. I think it's 8 days, 7 or 8 days, and it's using up stuff from the hamper and what's left in the fridges and freezers and trying to get through the stuff that's available so that we start fresh for the new month, so that we clean the fridges and freezers out as much as possible before we get started. So I hope you enjoy. So we had pizza for dinner a couple of days before this day, and I had made extra dough balls so that I could par bake some bases for use for other things, but I never got around to par baking the bases. Like, I made pizza for dinner and then just didn't get around to par baking the bases. So they went into the fridge still in the container, and they're still good for a few days. Even yeasted ones, they will last for a few days in the fridge. I used the bases to make some sort of breakfast pizza type things. I used some apple butter barbecue I had open, there was some salami left over, we had dairy-free cheese from when I had made the pizzas that I had refrigerated, and some whisked eggs. So we're short on eggs at the moment, so I just whisked a few eggs up and added a drizzle of water to thin it out a little bit. Once I had the toppings on the pizzas, I just drizzled some of that whisked egg over the surface to cook off in the pizza oven. When I was a teenager, I used to work as a delivery driver for Eagle Boys Pizza, and their Aussie pizza with the egg on the top was one of my favourites. I used to only use half an egg. I found a whole egg too much, but their thin bases and Aussies with that half an egg on the top and cooked off was always one of my favourites. So I thought it would make a good sort of it was lunch, but a breakfast pizza type thing for everyone, and everyone really enjoyed it. We didn't have any bacon or corn or anything like that. We don't run out of all of that at this point, so it was very minimally topped, but it was still very tasty. After it was cooked, I also topped it with a little bit of mayo. The cheese, that because it had been refrigerated from last time, was quite firm, and it doesn't melt excessively. It gets soft and it puddles, but it doesn't sort of like stretch out or anything. It's a great texture and taste, but not really a pizza cheese. When I make it for the first batch of pizzas, it's still warm, and you can drizzle it all over the surface of the pizza, and that's a little bit more like having cheese on your pizza, but at this point it's spreadable, so it's really nice on things like quesadillas and toasted sandwiches because you spread it all over that and toast it, but it doesn't work as well on pizzas, but the kids like it anyway. For dinner that night we had risotto. I pulled out one of the boneless chooks from the freezer earlier in the day and then cooked it off in the barbecue. I did cut it up a little bit to make it cook quicker and more evenly because it wasn't completely defrosted. Then I cooked what I refer to as our naked risotto. It's a fairly neutrally flavoured risotto that I can then top with whatever we have available. I use a little white wine vinegar, some ghee, onion, garlic and rice, cook it off initially in the Thermomix, and then I top it up with the stock to the max line, a bit of vegeta or nutritional yeast, and cook it for the 15-20 minutes. Most of the recipes for risotto that come with the Thermomix, you use about 300 grams of rice, and they normally have add-ins, like you've got a mushroom risotto or a chicken risotto and things like that, which also takes up space in the bowl. I've found that by leaving out any of those add-ins and just making it naked, as I said, then I can bump that to about 500 grams of rice with the liquid filled to the max line, and an extra couple of minutes cook time. And this means that I can cook up 2 jugs of risotto, and there's a kilo of rice cooked, and that's enough for all of us. It's not an extensive meal and there's never any leftovers, but it's enough. That 1 kilo of arborio rice cooked up into the risotto is enough for all of us. When it's initially finished, it will look quite thin and soupy, but the rice won't have that little hard bit anymore. So the rice will be nice and tender, but it will be a bit soupy. Normally, especially in Thermomix recipes, they tell you to pour it into a thermoserver, which is a insulated bowl with a lid and a base. I don't have any at the moment. I did have some, I'm not sure where they are. But because I'm making 2 jugs full of it, I can just and I have multiple jugs, I just put the lid and the measuring cup on the jug and put it aside to thicken up while I made the second jug. You can add parmesan to this or butter after it's thickened up a little, whatever flavours you prefer. Darryl and I always add some cracked pepper and some salt. I regularly sprinkle it with a little parmesan or grana padano, whatever I happen to have in the freezer. And then I sliced up the boneless chook and served it over the risotto in a neat little pile. If we have it, grilled broccoli, beans, cauliflower, anything like that is nice too. I still make the risotto naked, but I grill that in a pan, put it on top of the risotto, the chicken on top, that kind of thing. Even carrots are nice on top. Baby spinach is really nice mixed through it too. That's something that I'm working on. I've actually got a garden bed out here that I've just topped up with soil, and I'm going to put a little tunnel over to get some spinach going for during the cooler months when it grows the best, so that we can use that for cooking. On the second day, for lunch, we had toasted sandwiches. Now, we had this a couple of days running, probably, toasted sandwiches. We got a few loaves of bread in the hamper, we got lettuce and tomatoes in the hamper, so we used that to make BLTs or ham, lettuce, tomatoes, or whatever we had. I found some bacon in the bottom of the freezer, so I pulled it out and we had it with these for a couple of days as lunch. So we just toast the bread up, put bacon, lettuce and tomato on, mayo, bit of sauce if we've got it, and that's just what we eat. It's something that we enjoy after the hampers because it's not something we eat all that often. I also baked a chocolate slab wacky cake that day as a treat or a snack for the kids. Wacky cakes are the depressionary cakes. They do not have eggs in them, so it's handy to be able to make that when we're low on eggs. I actually made a short for this. I should put that up too, to show how I made it in that slab size. For dinner, we had red curry. I'd run out of green curry paste, but I had half a red curry paste in the freezer from whenever I last made satay. I had this package of stir-fried chicken from the hamper to use, and I had plenty of vegetables, so I could pad it out because it's only sort of 400 or 500 grams worth of chicken. I cooked the curry paste off with some oil and some coconut cream till it bubbled and thickened up. Once it was simmering, I added in the chicken that I'd just diced up, and after that I added in the vegetables. So I had a whole lot of zucchini that came with the hamper, so I diced that up. I had broccoli and beans from the freezer that were vacuum sealed, that we had blanched and vacuum sealed, except that these two were the ones that we didn't blanch, and they are so much better. I am definitely not blanching next time I freeze. The texture on these was amazing compared to the stuff that I blanched. The stuff that I blanched went soggy no matter how I tried to cook it. Someone did just suggest trying to roast it, and I'll give that a go, but we've been really unhappy with the texture of the stuff that we blanched and froze, which is sad because that took a whole lot more time than just freezing it straight. But anyway, we won't be blanching it again this time. I had cooked up some sticky coconut rice. I added some coconut milk powder into the water when I cooked the rice, and then some coconut cream after it was cooked to give it that creamy, wet coconut rice texture that I like to have with my curries. It helps the kids too. If I'm a little heavy-handed on the curry paste, then this helps to dull the heat a little bit, which makes it better for them. Once the chicken was cooked and the vegetables were heated through, we served it up. Just a generous serve of rice and a couple of scoops of the curry. I add extra stock and coconut milk to my curry to make it a nice wet consistency, because this is just how we like to eat it. So it would have been that initial tin of coconut cream when I cooked off the curry paste, and then I would have added the chicken, veggies, and then I would have topped up the liquid accordingly to what I had in there. Added a jar of stock or some Vegeta and water, probably another tin of coconut cream, just added what I needed to get that consistency right to serve us all. The next day we probably had toasted sandwiches because I have nothing to show for lunch. But for dinner I'd been browsing the internet and I had seen a short for something called Whistlers. There is a regional name for it as well, but I'm not going to try and pronounce it, and decided that I wanted to give them a go. They're a potato dish and we got a whole lot of potatoes with the hamper, so it was a good combo to give it a go. I boiled a big pot of potatoes until they were tender, and then I pulled them out and peeled the skin off using the back of a fork to just sort of scrape it away. I'd normally would peel and steam these if I really needed them to not have skins, but I generally leave the skin on for most things. But the recipe said to do it this way, and so I did. It was kind of fiddly though, and felt a little unwieldy to do it that way, but whatever. After that I mashed the potato up. I added some egg and some flour. Now, this is resembling gnocchi, and I'm not a huge fan of gnocchi, so I wasn't real sure how this would go. The recipe showed a very different texture of the potato mix, even though I added more flour than was listed. I know different potatoes have different water contents too, but regardless, the recipe as written seemed nothing like what I ended up with. I just went with it and kept on going. It's food and we're going to eat it regardless. The idea is that you have a dough that in the images looks a little bit like pasta dough or pastry, but this was far too soft and tacky for that. You cut it into triangles and you fry it off. So my thoughts as I was doing this is that it was kind of like gnocchi but without the boiling, maybe, which I was hoping would appeal to me a little more. And in the recipe it looks kind of crunchy on the outside, so we were persevering. I worked my way through all the dough that I had, cutting and frying and putting it on a rack when it was done. I then made a creamy onion, mushroom and bacon sauce, as was suggested with the recipe, using some caramelized onion jam. I made a roux with the flour in it, some coconut cream, a bit of Vegeta. This was pretty rich, but I felt it would go fine with the potato. Like, the potato is going to cut that richness down quite well. Everyone loved it, but everyone loves gnocchi except me. Each piece was soft by the time it was served, even if it was put on a rack. It was not crispy at all, and it still had that squeaky sort of bouncy texture like gnocchi. So I ate it, but it definitely wasn't worth the work and time for me. I would have preferred to have turned it into like bubble and squeak patties, smashed potato patties, rather than what it ended up being, but they all enjoyed it, and you know, that's fine. The next day, I'm not sure what Darryl and I had for lunch. Maybe there was a little bit of bread left, but the kids had all the leftover Whistlers. I remember that because Darryl was sad that he went to have some of the leftovers and there was none left because the kids had already eaten them all. So again, they all enjoyed them, and that's fine. I'm happy to make it again for their benefit, but I may do some research on the recipe and see if I can find a slightly better ratio to work, because it definitely didn't feel like it was correct. For dinner, I decided to use up some of the chicken trim that I got from the hamper. I had put it straight in the fridge to soften up a bit and defrost, so I knew I'd need to use it within a few days as it defrosted. I decided to make some chicken Kievs, so I pulled the mincer out and minced up one of the bags of trim. It was still partially frozen, so I went straight in with a small mincing plate and ran it through well. The Louvel is the mincer that I use. I do have an affiliate code in the description if anyone's looking on the lookout for a mincer. I really, really like it. It takes about 1 kilo a minute to put it through. It never struggles with anything I try and do. I've never had it overheat. It comes with a range of size of plates and sausage stuffers and everything else, and I have been very, very satisfied with that purchase. After that, I mixed up some garlic butter. This wasn't ideal. We were doing this on a quick sort of basis. It should have been frozen for a while. I emulsified some Nuddlex, garlic, salt, Worcestershire sauce, and a bit of Vegeta in the Thermix, and then rolled it into a log in cling wrap and threw it in the freezer. It's not going to have long enough to firm up properly, but we are working on a fly by the seat of the pants kind of a day. Now, I didn't have any crumbs, but I did have half a pack of puff pastry still in the freezer, so I decided to do some wrapped pastry ones. Maybe it would hold the garlic butter in better too, considering that the garlic butter was still going to be soft by the time I was using it. I put a scoop of chicken mince in, a dollop of the butter, and a bit of chicken mince over the top. I did a couple of different shapes, cutting the pastry into 4 and initially doing little like pasty, however you want to pronounce it, type parcels. Then I pulled the rest of the open puff pastry out of the freezer, and someone had taken the plastic off it but hadn't rewrapped it. So the edges were too brittle to use. I had to trim it down to use it, and therefore my squares were a little smaller than I would have liked. So I made them into sort of a folded dumpling instead. They look a little bit like soup dumplings instead of that sort of pasty sort of a shape. I gave them a little bit of an egg wash and I put them in the barbecue. These were very tasty, lovely and moist, but no overflowing butter pocket, unfortunately, which is probably to do with the fact that the butter was soft by the time I was putting it in there. I put some straight in the freezer, and Darryl will probably use them as a meal while I'm away. We served them with some mashed potato and steamed veg and what was left of the garlic butter mashed into the potatoes as well. Super tasty, still not quite what I was after, but again, that was my fault for shortcutting certain, aspects of it. I'm not going to get the results I'm after if I don't actually follow the way it's supposed to go. The next day for lunch, I had the rest of the chicken mince that I hadn't used for the Kievs. I'd run out of pastry before I ran out of mince, so I seasoned it up and cooked it off in the cast iron. I made some really quick flatbreads using my standard flatbread recipe and rolled them out fairly thin. I cooked them off in the cast iron as well. We just had these with some mayo and the chicken mince as sort of mini breakfast wraps. Normally I would do like scrambled eggs or something with this kind of thing, but as I've been saying, we're low on eggs at the moment with the colder weather, so we're sort of rationing them depending on what we need them for. For dinner, we just had bolognese from the freezer. So the dried spaghetti pasta and a sample run of the garlic breads I've been making with the bolognese out of the freezer, a jar of pasta sauce added to that bolognese mince just to thin it out a little bit and make it enough food for everyone to eat. The next day for lunch, we had some French bread that I hadn't done anything with yet. I've been making a lot of batches of these French bread in the lead up to sharing the recipe. So I've had some on various days just to use however we want. I sliced it in half, slathered it with some of the roasted garlic butter that I had made up, toasted it in the cast iron, and then did open face sandwiches using the chicken loaf I had made. So I'll try and remember to put the cards in here, but there's the chicken loaf that I'd made in the meat form steamer that I wanted to share how we used some of it, some mayo and a bunch of the avocado we got in the hamper as well. I put together a platter for the kids so they could serve themselves. There was some tomatoes available as well, I think, from the hamper, and some sauces and whatever else they wanted to add to theirs, but there was the chicken loaf and avocado and stuff that was really tasty. For dinner that night, we had sausages. So these are the last of the sausages that I had made in the last batch, so I'm going to have to look back at when we made these. I think it wasn't this shopping cycle, it might have been the shopping cycle beforehand, so each batch of these sausages might only last us around about 4 months, which is not bad, but it'd be nice to get a little bit, to do a slightly larger batch, because you don't want to be doing it in heat. But anyway, so we cooked off the sausages. You always cook them off low and slow so they don't dry out in the cast iron. I use a probe to check the internal temperature, and we just served them over mashed potatoes, steamed veg, and a generous amount of the so bad for us but so tasty gravy. Next day, lunch was basically the same as the day before. Some French bread, split, buttered and toasted, the rest of the chicken loaf and avocado with mayo and stuff. This French bread has been lasting us really well. You can toast it 2 or 3, 4 days after making it, and it still goes really nice and soft. That olive oil content or fat content of that dough works really well to keep it nice and soft. For dinner, I did a creamy sun-dried tomato penne pasta. I cooked up some more of the minced chicken trim. I had used a bunch of this for making the chicken loaf, but still had some more. So I seasoned it and cooked it off. I used the Thermomix to make the sauce. I whizzed up some sun-dried tomatoes, garlic, onion, added some white wine vinegar, a bit of stock and some coconut cream, and let it cook until it reduced and thickened a bit. Cooked the pasta in boiling water, added the chicken and poured the sauce over. Again, I wish I had some spinach or something in the garden, because I'd really like to have had spinach or something stirred through this kind of a pasta dish, but I didn't, so this is what we got. It was very tasty though. And I've been asked a few times about doing some videos on the Thermomix and my favorite recipes and stuff. This sun-dried tomato sauce that I make quite a bit. It has a very similar sort of one to it, and it'll be one that I'll make sure to share it in a Thermomix, sort of a what I use my Thermomix for the most sort of thing. The next day for lunch we had a vegetable scramble on sort of a flatbread tortilla type thing. I diced up a whole lot of the zucchini that I had left from the hamper, tomato, and I made my simple flatbread dough and just rolled it out fairly thin and cooked it off. I cooked off the zucchini and tomato with a bit of salt and pepper, poured over a dozen eggs that I had scrambled and cooked it through. I cut up some avocado, made some fresh mayo, my standard mayo with 2 eggs, cowboy candy, some Dijon mustard and lemon juice, and then olive oil. Used the immersion blender to emulsify it. We served the flatbreads with some mayo, the egg and vegetable scramble and avocado with a little salt and pepper, and it was very, very tasty. For dinner that night, I decided to pull some pork that I had in the freezer. So I had cut some of the roast up and left it in vacuum sealed in the freezer to use later on in the month. I thought I'd cook it all up so that we can use it for a few meals. I went super simple, onion and garlic in the bottom of the pressure cooker, the pork pieces on top, covered with a jar of my plum barbecue sauce off the shelf, lid on and pressure cooked for 90 minutes. I baked some whole potatoes wrapped in foil from the bags I got in the hamper again. Once the pork was done, I shredded it all and seasoned it as needed. Then I split the baked potatoes. We had heated up some black beans from a jar on the shelf with a little bit of that plum barbecue sauce mixed through as well, and put a spoonful of them over the potatoes and then a spoon of the pulled pork. I crumbled the last of my Mersey Valley cheese over it as well. Of course, this dinner probably should have had a few more veggies in it, but you know, we had a whole lot of veggies for lunch. That's what I tell myself when I'm lazy with veggies for dinner anyway. So that was about a week of meals in my kitchen, using the food hamper and what we had left and what we were trying to get through to make sure that everything is used out of the fridge and freezer as needed. I'm dodging the sun here, sorry. So the hampers came at a really good time, that it had those bits of extra veggies and the meat and stuff that we could use and make sure that we had those extras added in, because sometimes towards the end of the month it does get a bit monotonous. We have plenty of frozen vegetables, plenty of the frozen bags that I buy. We still have like 4 of them left and I'm going shopping tomorrow, so that's fine. And we still have some bags of broccoli and beans in the freezer, but they were the blanched ones and we just weren't as enamored of them. But it's always nice to have fresh veggies in there as well. The texture of a fresh veggie cooked up is a whole lot different to a frozen one or that, and I much prefer them, so the hampers come in handy with that. So that was, as I said, that was another week of meals. Everyone enjoys these sort of short form, compacted ones too. Like, I know a lot of people like watching the whole meals being made too, but I think that this is a way, inspiration, sort of a video, like flicking through a recipe magazine. That's how I look at what we eat in a week when I watch them. Normally I do have a few more meals that run on from each other, and it shows how we use like the same, though I suppose I use chicken mince in like 4 different things this particular video. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed it and I will see you guys on the next video.